Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 983. I start off with knight f3, the Reti opening, and my opponent goes knight c6. An interesting response here. This is known as the black Mustang defense, and I've seen it. It's a rare move on the list here, but I've seen it often enough that I've learned the name of it. I see it fairly often in Blitz. It's kind of weird. Anyway, knight c6. It's an interesting move. If I reply here with e4, black will go e5. And that transposes into a king's pawn opening, either a Ruy Lopez or an Italian game or a Scotch, depending on how I play my next move. Of course, if I wanted a king's pawn opening, I would have started with e4. If you play d4 here, then black's normal move is d5. And after c4, this is transposed into a queen's gambit declined, the Chigorin defense. Although in the Chigorin defense, I probably would have moved my knight to c3 rather than putting my knight on f3. So a bit of a offbeat line in the Chigorin defense, but certainly playable. In fact, the chess engine gives that d4 move as the best move for white in this position. But anyway, I didn't go for those. I went for c4. I wanted to say and stay in Reti or English lines. And then he continued with the b6 here. Probably the best move for black at this point is to play e5, and that would go that would transpose into an English opening. Black is going for a reverse Sicilian type of setup against the English, but he goes with b6, and we're just out of the opening book at this point. So what I can say about black's opening is that he can play it quickly. Because all his pieces are only on the first three lines, pieces and pawns. He never moves a pawn past the third line here, or the sixth rank, until let's see, yeah, I think move 8. He finally ventures to cross that third line. So that means black can snap out these moves quickly, which is an advantage in Blitz. And the other thing black is getting out of this opening is that because he's just playing in his own territory here, he can set up a position that he's familiar with, and maybe more familiar with than his opponent. So black is trading all of that for a lack of space. So the chess engine certainly prefers white in this opening most of the way, and that's because of the lack of space that black has in the opening. But it's a playable opening, and those advantages of being able to move quickly and getting to familiar positions, those are can be very important in a Blitz game. So I think it's actually a reasonable way for black to play, although a little bit peculiar looking. Anyway, he went g6 here, staying with that idea of just putting pieces on the first three rows. He did have an interesting opportunity here to play the move knight to e5 if he had broken his rule about not crossing the third line there. It's a cute move, right? I can just take the knight, but my bishop is hanging, and he is kind of threatening to take the knight, well, take twice on f3 and then double my pawns there. The chess engine says castling is just fine for white here, not to worry about that, or queen b3. It gives those two moves as both good for white, so I guess it's not a big deal, but an interesting possibility nonetheless, and probably better than g6. Let's see, I castle here. He went bishop g7. Go knight c3, so this is normal development. He goes e6. Once again, e5 would be better, but he's sticking to those first three rows. And then here I make what I consider the first mistake of the game. I wanted to play d4, and I was playing e3 in a way to set that up. You know, maybe there's still a little bit of indecision about whether I wanted to play d4 or not yet. But e3 makes no sense unless I'm going to play d4 as a follow-up, so I might as well just play d4 right away. And of course the point is it's already defended. So it's defended twice and attacked twice, but that's not a problem. And without e3 in the way, I can just develop my bishop immediately to some good square, maybe put the bishop on e3 itself, prepare to exchange on h6 later by lifting the queen up. So I made the first mistake in this game, I think, with e3 here. Of course, it's not a huge mistake, and white still has that advantage in space, but, well, other things happen. Let's see, he goes knight f6, I go d4, d5, so there he goes, crossing the line on move 8. I take. I could have just defended the pawn with something like b3. That would be reasonable too. But I had the idea of developing my bishop out on this diagonal as we saw in the game. So I took, just wanted to not have to worry about that pawn while I do that. And then I played rook to e1. And so this is the part of the game where I make my second mistake here. It's I have this plan of pushing the pawn forward, and it's just a plan that will never work. He just castled here and let me do it, which is the right thing. Although he didn't punish it. Let's see. He took, which is correct. I took. And then he should just keep trading here. Knight takes e4, rook takes e4, and queen d7. This is the line given by the chess engine, preparing to bring a rook over and just win that pawn. And it's a little awkward to defend if I bring the bishop out here to e3. It blocks the retreat of the rook, which will probably get into trouble on the fourth rank there. So the chess engine gives this as the best line for both sides. I should push on with d5. He can play knight to a5. So I do get to push his knight off to the side, and then I should drop my rook back and redeploy it somehow and just sacrifice this pawn. Just says I should give it up right away. And there's no, it would be nice if there was a backfire here, but well, his bishop is defended, and plus he can always throw in the trade of queens with check. So probably the rook e2 move is to prepare rook to d2 to chase his queen off if he doesn't trade immediately. Oh, it's my turn here. Yeah, so I can start chasing his queen. I didn't follow it after that. Anyway, I just saw I'm losing a pawn there, and it's better for black in any case. So that was my mistake, but he didn't exploit it. He played knight to d5 instead, so that was his mistake. And we're still about even, with white being slightly better with a little better development and space. Not much, though. It's getting pretty even here. See, I developed with bishop g5. He kicked it with f6, and I dropped back here. And now he makes another mistake, which is to push on with f5. And actually, I just put my bishop back there. But there's some really interesting tactics here. I suppose I should point out that the chess engine gives queen e7 as the best move here. Queen d7, rather. So he didn't have to play f5. There's nothing really challenging there, and just lift your queen up and connect your rooks. Complete your development is the right thing to do in this position. So f5, kicking my knight, is just asking for trouble. Now I moved my bishop back to that open square to harass his queen again, but a much stronger move is knight to g5. Yeah, it took me a while to figure this one out. There's a lot of things that can happen here, but first of all, the knight is threatening to come in here to e6 with a fork, so that has to be dealt with. Queen d6 seems pretty natural. Then the second move to follow up is queen to b3. And the defect of having moved that f-pawn forward is now fully evident. This knight is pinned, and it's under fire. If he could move his pawn backwards, that would be the best move here, because then he'd be free to save his knight. But as it is, that knight is already in a bit of trouble, because the bishop, I just need to move my other knight away, and it's going to be under fire here. It's going to be hanging. Yeah, it's loose now, and it'll be hanging after I move the knight. So a couple of different tries here. Let's say rook f to d8. Seems like a natural move to just defend like that, so that moving the knight is not a big threat. I can actually play knight takes h7. This is just to show you some of the tactics in this position. If he takes it, and I can come in here with check, and the king goes back. And then there's this crazy deflection. Rook d8 check, rook e8 check. Notice that I've managed to clear this diagonal with check, so I have two pieces attacking the knight, but it's defended now because the rook and the queen are defending it. So rook e8 check deflects the rook away from the defense of the knight. So if he takes, then I can take here with check. And then the king runs away. Then I have knight here check, getting the queen back. There were other variations there, but just wanted to show that. So things, rook f d8 is actually a bad move, and he's in big trouble after that. Another try here. Let's see. Yeah, how about just taking this knight and dropping it back to e7. Well then, instead of knight to e6, I have rook to e6, chasing the queen back, and then the other rook to e1. And this is just a powerful attack. I've got all of my pieces into the attack, and his counterplay against my king has disappeared when I chased his queen back, and as it is, he's got these pieces over on the queen side that are not contributing to the defense, whereas all my pieces are pointing in this direction, in the middle, or towards his king. So he's in big trouble here. So best play here, according to the chess engine, is to play. No, it didn't back up. Let's back up. Rook f to e8. Okay, get away from the knight to e6 threat, and maybe threaten to trade. After rook f to e8, I can still take on h7. And then there's a series of exchanges. He can actually grab this pawn. It is, he's got the bishop attacking it as well as the knight. So I take, and I'm bringing more pressure on this knight. He takes here, and then I can bring this knight back to g5. So both sides have snagged a pawn, and the material is otherwise even. But the chess engine says white is winning here, probably because of the pin and the otherwise somewhat awkward placement of black's pieces and his exposed king. So even though the material is even, pawns are even, my king is a lot safer than his king. And there's, well, I didn't follow it. There may be some immediate tactics I'm not seeing, but it just says white should go on to win in this position. Anyway, fun stuff. So he went f5. I didn't play knight to g5. I went bishop to g5. And he just moved his queen. As we saw on the other line, moving the queen to d7 was sometimes black would do unprompted. So I'm kind of just helping him out here. He did have one option here, which is interesting. He could have taken the knight and given up the queen. He gets another knight. And having taken two pieces for the queen, there's also both bishops hanging. So in fact, he's going to get three whole pieces for the queen. I could save either bishop. The chess engine wants to save this one, and thinks black should take this one, and then this bishop retreats. So maybe you can see it here. These two bishops cancel each other, and black has these three pieces, the bishop and two knights, and I have the queen. And thinks that's a game, thinks it's in the range of even. Anyway, he went queen d7, a much more normal move. I went knight to c3. My knight's still hanging there, so I got to get it out of the way. And now he went rook a to e8. A really logical move, just getting another piece into the game. But there actually is a tactic here that I missed. And I think it was this point in the game where I was thinking that his position felt a little loose to me, but I did not find anything. But maybe you can, with the advantage of hindsight, maybe you can figure something out here. I'm going to give this to you as a tactics quiz. I think if I had been playing in a regular time control and overboard slow game, I think I could have figured this one out. So if you want to take a few minutes and figure it out, you should be able to, I think. Pause the video here if you want some time to think about it. So anyway, I'm giving the answer here. The starting move is just take that knight and bring the queen forward. And that's kind of natural, I would say, because you're putting the queen in the sights of this bishop here. And then the next move is knight to d5, natural follow-on to kick the queen away. The funny thing is the queen has no good square to go to here, and this is the part you had to see. So the queen drops all the way back, and you just take the knight. You've got two pieces on that knight, and so that's the basic idea. You win a piece here. So what else could... yeah, I started off with the trade. So materials even, and then play the knight here. The queen has to move. So where can it go to defend the knight? If it goes to this square, or it's in the range of my rook here, so I can take the knight with an attack on the queen, so that doesn't work. If it goes back to this square, defends the knight from the side, Then there's this nice sequence here. Let's see if I can remember this. Yes, you start with the check. And then if the king steps to the side, you've got knight here check. And you're winning some material this way. So that's a cool thing. And let's see, last choice. Let's see, brought your knight here. The queen is under fire. If it runs over here to try and defend the knight, then you just play f4. And the queen just runs out of squares from which it can defend the knight. So you get a piece back. But that is the kind of calculation that takes a bit of time to do. So anyway, I understand if you didn't see it, even knowing that there was a hint there. Anyway, so I didn't spot that. Well, I had a feeling there was something going on there, but I didn't figure it out. So I played queen d2. And now, I'm still just a little bit better here, but we get a normal game for the next 10 or so moves. So let's just step through them. There's a lot of trades here. And after all of the trades, we get to an endgame where white is just a little bit better. Probably, oops, we were here. Let's see, I just had taken the knight, he takes back. Oh, he took back with the rook. And that was probably, let's see, I took with the bishop, he took with the rook. And then I keep taking, and he gets the pawn here anyway. So this is the endgame we get to. It's I'm calling it an endgame even though there's queens on. It's just one queen and one rook. You could think of this as a late middle game or early endgame. I don't know. And it's just a little bit better for white. This pawn maybe is a little bit loose. Black's king is a little bit more exposed and have a little more control over the center. But probably black could defend this. So let's continue on. I keep a slight edge through this part. I push the pawn with check, he drops back, bring the rook to the center, all pretty natural. He goes queen f5, holding on to things and looking at my f2 pawn, but I had spotted that idea. I play queen d4, brings his rook over here to support this pawn, and I play rook e3 to blockade it, and with the idea of playing f3. And he played queen g4, which in fact is a losing move. Although there was only one move here to defend, and that was king to f7. He had to defend the rook to make this move pointless because he could just take it, and then it's just a rook trade here. But if he defends the rook any other way, well, that's really basically the only way he can defend it. If he defends this way, I can bring my queen in with check, I guess, and then take a pawn over here if nothing better. So, but rook to f7 or king to f7 had to be played here, and instead he played queen to g4. And I'm actually winning from this point forward. I just win this pawn, but really it was the only thing, that pawn was the only thing that black had going for him. And this endgame here is, well, I can't say it's simple because it's a rook and pawn endgame, but I have a winning advantage here. It's not like some rook and pawn endgames which are not winning. This one is winning if played correctly. So I play reasonably well. I open up some lines to activate my rook and get into his camp here. That was a big point to be able to break through and activate my rook. And then he ran into this mate here by playing rook f4. And then that's checkmate. That's how the game ended. But he was already in pretty bad shape here. There's only two ways to stop the mate. The king has no moves. The rook has to go to f6 or to e8. And if it goes to f6, I'll just trade it off, and it's a winning king and pawn endgame because of these two passed pawns in the middle. So rook e8 is the toughest defense. But I just play rook g6. I can't defend that pawn, and I will just start mopping things up on the, I'll just push these pawns through over here on the king side. So pretty straightforward win from that point. Anyway, he made the game, allowed a nicer finish with this, this little trick. And something to watch out for in endgames, because you want to bring your king forward, you want to centralize your king in an endgame, and you want to blockade the pawns. So it's following two of the rules you want to follow in the endgame, but you always have to be wary of your escape plan if you get into a situation where you're short of squares like that. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Bye.